What is ISO 9001? And what are the absolute basics and key concepts you need to know to get started? Hello, I'm Jonathan. Welcome to Core Business Solutions. We are ISO experts helping small businesses across America. And if you're an absolute beginner and you're wondering what ISO 9001 is all about, this is for you. And even if you've been certified for years, you might learn something in this video. And stick around until the end. We have some great resources to help you make the most of ISO 9001. If you're a small business, your success hangs on customer and client trust. But how do you prove to potential customers that you're a quality business? ISO 9001 builds trust. It tells potential customers that you meet globally recognized standards of quality. This standard was written by the International Organization for Standardization and is recognized all around the world. It can scale up and down as needed for any business of any size. It also serves as the baseline for many other ISO standards. The things you gain from ISO 9001 will continue to serve you as you grow and expand. So to start, basically, what is ISO 9001? ISO 9001 is a quality management system standard, or QMS for short. But what is a quality management system? A QMS is made up of processes and documentation. Essentially, it's the formal system you put in place to ensure quality. It's a way of organizing your workflow to produce continual improvement and customer satisfaction. ISO 9001 helps you build a QMS that lives up to global standards. So now let's look at the standard itself. Before ISO 9001 gets into the actual requirements, it lays out some foundational concepts. The first major concept is the process approach. The process approach is a way of thinking about your whole business in terms of individual processes. Using this approach, you can break down your processes into parts and see how they all work together as a whole. You can think about your processes in terms of 5 essential checkpoints. First, you have your sources of inputs. These are the previous processes or policies that feed into the process at hand. Basically, it's anything providing resources to the process. And second, you have inputs. Inputs could be physical materials or information or any other resource required for your process. Consider the simple example of an assembly line producing steel widgets. The raw steel coming into the start of the assembly line is an input of the widget making process. Third, activities. This is a broad term for the actions you perform during the process. So to keep with our assembly line example, this is the machine work that transforms raw steel into widgets in that process. Fourth, outputs. These are the results of your process. So go back to that assembly line example. If the raw metal was the input, the finished widget is the output. But remember, this doesn't just apply to manufacturing. Outputs could be information, services, policies. Literally anything produced by your processes is considered an output. And fifth, receivers of outputs. Basically, where are your outputs going? Do they go straight to the customers? Do they feed other processes in your business? By considering your organization in these bite-sized pieces, you gain visibility. You can see more clearly which processes are key processes, which processes take higher priority, and which processes directly impact your customers. And depending on the size of your business, you might have a lot of processes to break down, and that might seem a bit overwhelming. It's easy for less important processes to slip through the cracks. And that's why each of these processes should have a process owner to keep track of its success. The next foundational concept for ISO 9001 is risk-based thinking. To understand ISO 9001, you need to understand risk-based thinking. This will drive your decision-making. It means thinking in terms of risks and rewards, not just the negatives, but also positives. The goal is to become proactive. When you're thinking one step ahead, you can mitigate risks and make the most of opportunities. That's why ISO 9001 requires a formal, documented risk management process. You'll be considering your risks one by one and deciding what to do about them. There's one more foundational concept to cover before we get into the rest of the standard, and that's the PDCA cycle. Plan, do, check, act. All the requirements of ISO 9001 fall somewhere in this cycle. You can think of it as a map of ISO 9001 itself. This cycle shows how your entire quality management system works toward continual improvement and customer satisfaction. It also shows that quality isn't a once and done thing. It's a continuing cycle of making plans, acting on those plans, evaluating your results, and making the needed improvements. So the first requirements of ISO 9001 fall under that planning phase of the PDCA cycle. And the first step of planning is to determine the context of your organization. As a company, you have all sorts of influences. Influences here is a broad category. This could mean people, policies, regulations, facilities, literally anything that influences your business from the inside or the outside. And this includes what ISO calls interested parties, people with any sort of stake in your business. This could be employees, management, customers, partners, shareholders, even regulatory bodies. All these influences form a web of connectedness, and that web is the context of your organization. Now, this is important. With a clear picture of your context, you can develop a quality management system that fits your specific needs and goals. The next requirements deal with leadership. Top management needs to take hands-on ownership of your quality management system. That's why you find leadership at the center of the PDCA cycle. All the spokes of the wheel connect to this hub. Top management bears several major responsibilities. They need to create your quality policy. That's a document that demonstrates your commitment to high quality. They need to set objectives and delegate responsibilities. They should also review your system regularly and provide the resources you need to achieve quality. Top management steers the ship. The next part of the planning phase is, simply enough, called planning. This is where risk-based thinking comes into play. You need to take all the risks you identified and come up with objectives to address them. And be specific here. Create goals you can actually benchmark, because later on it's not going to help if your only objective was do better. You need to pick objectives you can quantify. Finally, the planning phase ends with support and resources. Again, leadership must provide the resources and support you need. This means employees, facilities, equipment, basically anything you need to effectively run your business. This requirement covers several key areas, but let's zoom in on just one: communication and awareness. Communication is one of the easiest places for quality to break down. ISO 9001 makes it a top priority. You need to make sure everyone is aware of the policies and changes in your organization. Next, we've reached the do phase of ISO 9001. This starts with operation control. In this phase, you're essentially enacting the plans you made during the planning phase. So let's break this down into its two main parts. Operations is a blanket term for pretty much everything that goes into creating your products and services. And controls are the steps taken to direct your processes toward the desired results. By controlling specific risks, you can avoid costly errors. But how do you know that these controls are doing what they're meant to do? That's why ISO 9001 continues on into the check phase with performance evaluation. In this phase, you check your processes and ask, how do my results stack up against the goals I've set? Think back to the process approach. Consider the outputs of your processes. Are you getting the outputs you wanted? Or do you see what ISO 9001 calls non-conformities? Things that don't conform to your quality management system. As part of evaluation, you're required to perform an internal audit. Think of this as a dry run of your official third-party certification audit. This lets you find issues and correct them before certification is on the line. And now, this internal audit can be a tricky part of certification for companies unfamiliar with ISO 9001. At Core Business Solutions, we provide internal auditor training courses for ISO 9001 and other standards, so you can perform your internal audit with confidence. And our Core Compliance platform provides online tools to help you track nonconformities. Finally, we reach the act phase, where we turn those evaluations into actual improvement with corrective actions. Now, that might sound like a harsh term, like you're wagging your finger at someone, but in this context, corrective actions are just the steps you take to fix the issues you found during your evaluations. Corrective actions get at the root cause of a problem to prevent similar issues from happening again. And an important note, your company leadership should be driving this improvement. ISO 9001 requires top management to meet regularly to review your quality management system and address the issues they discover. So now you can see how the PDCA cycle works through the whole ISO 9001 standard, all to produce customer satisfaction on the other end. But remember, this is a cycle. Once you're finished, you start back at the beginning. That's how ISO 9001 drives continual improvement and customer satisfaction. That brings us to the end of the standard, but we've still just scratched the surface. You can learn even more by visiting our website and downloading our free ISO 9001 guide. This guide will cover the information you learned here and more. We also have articles that go even further into ISO 9001 and related standards. At Core Business Solutions, we help hundreds of American small businesses achieve ISO 9001 certification every year. And we see results. If you're facing the daunting task of ISO 9001 certification, don't feel like you need to do it alone. When you work with us, we'll walk alongside you through the whole process. We also provide access to the Core Compliance platform, which comes preloaded with customizable tools ready-made for ISO 9001 compliance. In short, we make ISO 9001 fast, simple, and effective. Thanks for watching. If you learned something new, give this video a like, share it with somebody else who needs it. Subscribe to our channel for more great ISO and cybersecurity content to optimize your business. Have a great day.